Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be doing our Prospero educational webinar series. Today's focus is on multi-company consolidation. And my name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX group, so welcome one and all. And the audience that we normally have for these sessions is mixed. We have some existing Prospero customers and some prospective ones, so we want to welcome one and all to today's session. We do have a regular webinar series as well throughout the next few weeks and months. And let me just briefly go to our website, the website msxgroup.com, and you'll see within this upcoming events link here in the top right, we have several webinars, and of course we have a lot on the flagship Microsoft products that you probably are coming from or using currently today, like Microsoft FRX and Manager Porter on the reporting side, and Microsoft Forecaster on the budgeting side. And most have converted to Prospero, so today's session is to get you further acquainted with that easy transition to such. And within the Prospero webinar series, today again we'll be focusing on multi-company consolidation. Earlier we had a session on reporting basics, and later in this week, we'll be having some budgeting overview. I'll maybe just give you a splash screenshot of the budgeting window today, just to introduce that concept and thought. And let me take a second to further introduce myself and the MSX group. Again, my name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX group, and I've been doing this for a very, very long time, going on about 25 years in the consulting arena, so I'm a recovering accountant. We always like to tease ourselves as. And our entire team, the MSX group, if we turn the clock back many years, we all started at FRX Software, where we helped develop, deliver, and support those flagship products for about 12 plus years when we internally worked at FRX and Microsoft. And now the last 10 years, we've been operating under the MSX group company name. And during that 10-year stint, we've also released Prospero that hundreds of customers utilizing today. One nice thing is we have an easy report conversion. So if you're using Microsoft FRX or Manager Porter, we have a nice report conversion that brings all of your reports into Prospero. But then today I want to shed a little light on some additional efficiencies you're going to be gaining with a lot of the new features within the product. And last slide or two, just at a very high level point, Prospero for those prospective customers does both reporting and budgeting / forecasting. Most of that data will be read directly from your general ledger, but we always like to add that we can report and budget on any non-general ledger data. A couple quick examples might be some customers that want the GL to go down to an additional project module, or maybe grab from an HR system database. Then on the budgeting side, how about revenues taking it down to customer and product, or in the salary human resources side, budgeting down to employees, so you have a lot of flexibility of such. And when we talk about multi-company consolidations, here today is going to be a little bit of the agenda we'll be discussing. I'll take multi-company and report it three common ways. First of all, we'll be looking at our companies as the report parameter or main prompt that you maybe toggle between within your report. We'll also talk about security considerations in that regard. Second report of three I'll show you is where you'll show your companies or filter them side by side in columns. And third, you have easy flexibility to bring your columns into your line filters. And as I go through various reports, I want to shed a little light on a lot of the efficiencies to bring the easy button to your reporting and budgeting life. And a couple of those bullet pointed would be expand lines to avoid and reduce all of your line set maintenance as you add new general ledger accounts. The awesome reusable nature to these rows, columns, and trees, where I can inventory and easily create one line set that's used for many reports. I also can see where they're used. So I think I favor that versus some other applications that are disparate, like different Excel files or individual cells where you have to do the mapping. That does not apply to Prospero. It's the flagship accountant-friendly rows, columns, trees you can reuse over and over. And that also goes hand in hand with our reporting trees that we'll leverage. Then additionally, any of those people that come from Microsoft Forecaster, there's great ability to do in an account tree that we now have in Prospero. Like, here's all my revenues, all my expenses, and I might want to expand and show all of those. My personal feature is the drill down bullet point, where we'll be looking at, yes, drilling into a financial account and transaction level, and even across multiple columns and cells. It's not a single cell drill through, so that way I can easily compare and contrast. Secondly, within drill down, we have two methods of drill down, what we call account level detail, where one click you can see all the detail, or secondly, I usually prefer reporting tree levels to break it down by company, division, or department, etc. I'll be demonstrating that a little bit later this morning. And finally, that drill order, I can easily change on the fly to have an easy, nimble report. Otherwise, in years past, using the old Microsoft products, I would have to have 2, 3, or 4 different reports, which now, with Prospero and changing the drill order, I can accomplish in one easy report. Then finally, last few little things I'll shed light on today is report collections. Like at month end, how about I send all of you 3 or 4 reports? That way I can easily combine them all together, just generate it once and distribute that easily. And that goes with some of the notes about security. This is by accountants for accountants with little or no IT involvement, so buzzwords we hear. And now let me jump directly into the Prospero application. And how about, first of all, what I'll do is through the eyes of an end user. I've previously logged in. However, thinking about just the infrastructure of Prospero, we could easily deploy it in a client-server environment. Either you host those on your servers, or secondly, you might have a third party doing so, or finally, we even have customers that utilize MSX to host this application in their data warehouse database here. We can use Windows login as well, which IT loves hearing. That way you do not have to maintain separate user IDs and passwords. And once I log into the application with my legitimate user, I'll be restricted of what I can or cannot see. Like for this end user, notice here in the lower left we have very few links here. We have a published reports area. Secondly, an input if they do any budget input. And third, if you want them to be able to run reports, they can do so on the fly here in the report area. But sometimes you only distribute only. They might only view reports only, not run them. So they might have only published reports. But this user also can run them in the reports area. In this published reports area, we can group our reports into any folders imaginable, like date-driven, like this year 2019, months within, or the example A might be different groups of users you might segregate and store different reports, or it might be based on some monthly reports, quarterly, etc. And then to the right, I have a nice quick launch area, because immediately when I log into the application, I might have with a one-click button me being able to open up the last published report. Now let me take a second to acquaint you further with our demonstration company's structure. We are definitely multi-company. Secondly, we have location segment, department, and third, we have an account segment like revenue, expense, and balance sheet. You don't see the account segment because we've predefined that in the lines of this income statement report, but then a user might be prompted for these various other responsibility centers, as I'll generically call it. And for company, in our demonstration database, we have multiple company, but we've only given this user access to company 1. Or similarly, what is called assignments. I'll take you to a security window later. In the location, here is where I have 2 ways I can see a list of, in this case, locations. Here in the lower left, I can look at through a tree, which has different hierarchy structures to it. And what's great is, out of the box, without having to do anything, Prospero automatically creates a tree called all that rolls up everything. Which translated another way, if I add new locations, I add new departments or accounts, it automatically captures it. So you do not have to create this tree nor maintain it. So that's a huge win. And I'll also reiterate a couple of keywords like the expand feature, like total expenses. I'm going to expand to show all. I'll just open up the report as is, just looking at company 1, all location, all departments. And since this end user, has some limited visibility behind this report, I'm now just going to toggle to see within a power user more capabilities. Like here to the left, we have additional links for this power user. I'm going to go back into the same report window and open up this infamous budget versus actual favorable unfavorable report. Now as an administrator, here's where you define your consistent lines and columns that are familiar and reusable. What also I like about this application versus some other budgeting reporting tools that I've worked with over the years out there is, in this catalog view, I can easily maintain and inventory all my various reports. I can click on any one of these column headings, like the lines heading, and notice here, there's this one line set called income statement that we're using for many reports, so I can easily inventory it, where other applications I have no visibility or reusable nature like you see here, which is awesome for setup maintenance and obviously training and migrating. And some new features, probably about 10 I'll be covering today, more within the application Prospero, especially if you migrate from the Microsoft stack to Prospero. Let me cancel out. I'll go ahead and run this report. And these are some additional runtime settings. Rarely do I change that the end user did not. The end user only saw here in the top left the different responsibility centers they choose, but now one key difference is I have access to all companies, as seen in this consolidated tree view, or if I turn off the check mark, there's my overall list view and two levels like posting or summary. For different output options, FRX used to have some of these. We've added more, but then when Manager Porter came out, they got removed. Manager Porter, you only could output to the viewer, so we've now brought these back, and I'll demonstrate definitely primarily through the workspace, meaning the electronic viewer, where you have a lot of nimble capabilities and interactions with the report. But I'll also show you some other like Excel or PDF output, and even this publish reports area we saw briefly within the end user's realm. Now, one of my favorite features, I always like analyzing data instead of processing it. This navigation pane to the left, I can minimize or maximize to give me some additional real estate room. And one of my favorite features is the drill order. Let me show you briefly at a high level. Back in the report, on this Options tab, we have two options when we generate a report. I'll first of all demonstrate reporting tree levels, which means based on your different companies and segments down below, you can toggle and filter within. Or the second option is reporting tree level, account level detail, which means one click, I see everything with no subgroups. Right now it's set at reporting tree levels. When I drill in, we're going to see company first, location second, etc. And I can drag and drop these in any predefined order that I want. Or even better yet, after the report has been ran, I can change the drill order. I'm going to take sales as my first example. And one extra new feature of many is the ability to show additional lines or columns. In this case, maybe at times I want to see the account number, or when I drill in, I want to see the company or department number. Otherwise, in your years past using the Microsoft stack, usually you have to have a second or third report to accomplish again what one report allows me with just a couple of these toggle settings. When I drill into sales, my first level of drill down is the company. So here is, as I display columns, I could have left that on always, Company 1 US or Company 2 Europe. That's my first level of my reporting tree drill down levels. And then I'll take this US line, double click and click in, and my next level are my different locations, like Miami, Denver, San Francisco, etc. Now personally, I favor more easy multitasking. I can come around and bounce to tab number 1, my original report, or here is tab number 2 when I drilled in to look at the companies, or tab number 3, I drilled into US report and I'm seeing the US locational breakout of my revenue. Now any one of these slices of the report, I can easily chart that data. Or secondly, maybe take it out to Excel. How about the latter? Excel. It just asks me for any file name and output. So I'm just giving it a file name, clicking Save for that default location. So this drill down slice of the information I now have in an ad hoc nature in Excel. I can further work with that data for any analysis or share it with others. I could have also done it to a PDF. Now, right now, we have just one Excel sheet being shown, but I do have some other outputs I've previously done to save time, like this one for my multi-company reporting. And one of the key things of this first report of 3 is the segregated nature I could distribute and view the data in. So for an example, when in Prospero, in the viewer, I ran a report for all companies that we currently see here in Excel. Or I simply ran it for all companies, sending it to Excel, like Company 1 sheet, the heading and the data, or now here's Company 2 sheet, the heading and their data. Now, it would just have been separate tabs as I go back to the Prospero application. So there's further example of the Excel output. Now let me turn my attention to displaying the data as a chart. All you have to do is turn on one little check mark at the report definition level. There is one graph type, a pie graph. I'll return to it in just a second. However, the real easy nature to producing that graph, which is three-dimensional and drill downable, is on this chart tab. All you have to do is turn on to allow the chart view. And secondly, we have various chart types you can choose from. I'll leave that up just for a second as we see those different chart types. I have it currently ran at pie. Now in Manager Reporter, it was pretty lame. You only can graph one single row or one single column, and it was static. You cannot drill. But in this particular report, it's multiple column, like actual prior year budget. It's multiple cells and lines, like my different locations I happen to drill down to. And even I could have returned to the original report and displayed it as a chart. And it might have a different little glimpse now. Instead of all the different locations in my legend, I then have my different account groups here. And I'll come back to that drill order in just a second there. Now in this last graph that I drilled into the locations I've returned to, and three-dimensionally I can drill in a little bit further to see the supporting detail behind it. And it looks like here's our two main divisions. We have a sales division and marketing division. And just like I switched to the graph view, any drill down into my graph, I can do the reverse. I can switch it back to the report view. So here's my sales I drilled into. Now here are the different divisions. Additional tabs just got added from the left to the right, so I'll just close out a couple of these as I return. Now one of my favorite things too is being able to change on the fly the drill order. So as I close out a couple of these reports back to the original one, I can on the fly change the drill order. Instead of company first, location second, etc., that usually I predefine at the report level, I'm just going to come up here and drag location first randomly. Then when I click OK, instead of drilling into company 1, 2, 3, now when I drill in, it's going to be location A, B, C. And one final review of that button is nimbly on the fly changing the drill order. This does not affect my permanent report settings. It's just on the fly. And this is what we call reporting tree levels. Now, quick illustration too of the second option of drill down is down to account level detail. So let me just reopen the report tab for that. On the options tab, reporting tree levels, I'm simply going to change it to account level detail. Now as I generate the report, I'll run it for the same parameters, meaning all companies, or I could come up here and have chose it for, let's say, company 1, 2, or 3. Now, very easily, I could have chosen multiple company to run it for, and that's really what I did when I sent it out to Excel. But I saved time and I previously ran it for all companies here. Now, a new feature within this last 2019 year is also the ability to have a line set that predefines your report parameters or prompts. And there's one line set out here that I've created that has the companies in it, but at least I'll refer to this new field where you can predefine your report parameters or selections. I'll just run it for all just for speed here. And with the account level detail, with one click, you see the entire kitchen sink not subgrouped or not by reporting tree levels. Now, what I failed to do is I forgot to just close out this report, so my apologies then. So I just closed the previously output report. I'm now just rerunning it. With account level detail, two other little bullet points I want to call your attention to before I drill down is our ability for transactions to say do not include at all transactions, maybe for speed, or posted, unposted, or both. And based on what general ledger system you're on, most we do support this, but let us know. Prospero interfaces with a long list of different general ledger systems, and they're continually being added to, so let us know. I'll be putting up my email to conclude today's session with any questions on that. Additionally, the check mark beneath it is the ability to allow users or you to drill down to those transaction levels. And let me return back to the report. Now with just one click, I see the entire kitchen sink, meaning multi-company. It's not filtered or by company, but sometimes you might favor that. This is the account level detail of our different segments. Now briefly, we only have 3 segments. Segment 1 is the account number. Segment 2 is our location. Segment 3 is department. Now, we really don't per se have the companies shown here. I'm going to just run it for just Denver or company 1 to drill in. Now, I'll segue just in a second to our segments and multi-company to acquaint you with it a little bit further based on your environment. But my next click after the account level detail would be transactional detail. And in our sample database, we have some more generically named customer items, but we have in our column definition, like actual budget, etc., calculations for variances. We also can show vendor or customer information. And how about on that phrase? I'm just going to take you briefly to the column definition. We've simplified things. Instead of calling it an FD, a financial dimension column, like in your manager porter world, we more aptly call that a balance column. We can grab either actuals or different budgets, either from your general ledger, or most people are entering budget real time in the Prospero database. They no longer are doing double the work in a reporting and budgeting application. Also, all this budget could be entered and read real time from the Prospero application. We secondly, after having some balance columns, we have some calculated columns for our variances of dollar and percent. And then just a little heads up that here are detailed column types. And based on what general ledger or accounting ERP system you're on, then you might have different fields below you could then display when drilling into transaction detail. And even we've added some of these fields by request by customers, so that is an option as well. I'll keep columns very high level for now, but one thing I want to maybe wrap up with is looking at the properties. For any new column, you usually have your period, like this year, last year, your different months, actual budget, etc. However, in the second report of 3 I'll get to later, all we had to do is turn on the company filter. It gave me a new field or column or filter here, and then I could choose company 1, 2, or 3, or maybe even groups of companies as defined within our trees. Now, speaking of trees, probably time permitting, I won't be able to get into all I normally like to during a session, but I did a beginning report session earlier in the week where we looked at trees a little bit further. Let me take you briefly to the location segment that I'm now turning on to filter and see. It just added this new field or filter for my column. And now here's really the default tree called all. You do not have to create nor maintain, great to hear and say. But here might be tree number 1. We've broken out by our different divisions or different regions. And usually in your tree, we recommend and aim for wildcarding. That way you do not have to maintain this going forward. Or also you can use individual items or a combination of ranges and wildcards or individual to refine our trees. We can drag and drop, easy for reorganization, but trees are going to be very user-friendly, centralized, to have consistency and little or no maintenance to your reports. Let me close out of that column definition, returning back to where I was. That's the transaction detail. I'm back to the account level I'm closing out. now to the original financial level. One or two other highlights of my favorite features as we look at some of these consolidated reports is this total expenses. As I show hidden columns, I can always show if I wish. We are using what's called a summary account that you can name anything you wish. We've named it EXPN. Above this row, we are showing every individual account. Or I could have said show me only one level down, which might be maybe three subgroups of salaries, wages, travel expense, utilities, etc., as you wish and define in your account roll-up tree, but we're showing all individual accounts. Then in the line set, let me focus on that same total expense line. You can see individual accounts or ranges up above, so we have a variety of ways to grab accounts, but what I'm going to take you to is the most common and efficient. In the account list, there's my tree view, but automatically we're reading from your general ledger. There's all the 1 asset accounts, or here's all the 4 revenue accounts, etc. That's a list view, but I'm going to go back to my tree view. Instead of having 5 or 6 trees on the account segment, normally you just have one that has both balance sheet and income, but here's our one purpose-built for net income. And finally is this one summary account called EXPN for total expenses. In our tree, we've defined a nice little range, which will require no maintenance as I add new general ledger accounts, and therefore no line set needed, not only for this report line set, but also I can use the same line set for a budget. Budget maybe all my 50 combinations of company location departments, all utilizing the same one line set real time. Last little couple key fields related to that expand field is where you can say expand above or below this summary account to show the detail. 0 levels means show me every individual account, but I could have had in my tree, like total expense, my example was maybe 3 subtotals. One is salaries, wages, maybe second is travel, third utility. Maybe I want to show one level down for a summarized income statement. And you can still drill beyond that. And looking briefly at the properties, especially company, when I get to my third report, all we simply did is turn on this filter, which added a new field, if needed, to then say, all right, here might be revenue for company 1 in this row, or here might be revenue for company 2 in this row. And then my same little selection, either using trees, even pre-built trees, like here's all my US companies, here's all my Canadian companies, or a list view to choose at. Ranges, wildcards, summary accounts, etc. Now, as I go to report number 2, there's always going to be some things I like and don't like about this report. Well, one is I like the drilled down nature to the report. I like the lines that have a lot of revenue expenses. I like the columns that could be varied, like actual budget, rolling 12-month, you name it. And even I can segregate this, like when we logged into user 1 that only had company 1, or user 2, just its data. As also we saw the Excel output a little bit more three-dimensionally of that same type of report data that might be segregated and secure. Now the second report, and at least I'll have and recommend the second flavor of 3 that you'll have in your report, that is filtering your companies side by side in columns. I just use this little keyboard shortcut to close all window, which is found under window. Yeah, I prefer using grouping tabs, but you can say cascading or no tabs for more Windows classic views. And then here I just came into close all, and even I can add some of these to my quick access toolbar, like my save, refresh button, and close all. So we have a lot of customizations we can do. I hate saying the word customization, it just makes it more navigable and user-friendly for me, but literally a click or two to accomplish that. One other remark I want to make on customizations, or shall I say new features. Never did FRX nor Manage Reporter have some global report settings you could predefine. But briefly under File Options, we have several little formats we can predefine. Like here in the report defaults, in today's focus on reporting, maybe I want to reverse the signs like revenue, balance sheet, liability, and equity, reverse the sign ahead of time. Usually I'll suppress 0 lines on report to only show accounts with balances. maybe different transactions, yay or nay to include on a global basis, and I can change it at a report by report basis or change it on the fly very easily. But these are some predefined global settings that could come to your aid, along with some of my formatting defaults of date, time, number formattings, maybe a second one just to call your attention to. And just for closure and repetition, I was just under File Options, seeing some of those. Now as I open up this second report of 3, we have this consolidated income statement as I run it. Now notice here, we do not have a company parameter or prompt for my report because we've already predefined my companies in the columns, as we'll see here in just a second. So I see always a flavor of this type of report. In this case, it's an income statement consolidated. Otherwise, I might have a balance sheet or a statement of cash flow reports that could also be automated and done also with Prospero. We have all the drill down natures we saw before using either reporting tree levels or account level detail all the way down to the transaction level. So I won't go into those extra clicks, but I'll reiterate those. Very easy column design. Let's return back to it populated. And then the second time we've seen it, that'll be that much more familiar. In the properties, we simply came up here and said, yes, I want a company filter. And then chose company A, B, C, or whatever is applicable. If any people are dealing with currency, we have the ability to grab from your general ledger where you convert either functional or originating currencies. And then sometimes even we've had people on the budgeting and import side. If you're on some third-party accounting software that may be an acquired entity or some other subsidiary of yours, odds are we probably have an interface already to it. Or I'm also thinking about, of these 10 years of Prospero implementations, we've also been able to link to some of this other data, either through an easy Excel import being one method, or a lot of times we can easily write a quick little integration script to grab maybe a third-party company if it's not on our long list of existing integrations. All right, so there's the extra glimpse at the column, throwing in a currency or non-GL comment or two, thinking outside the box of how we've met other needs and requirements. Let's now turn our attention to the third example report, where in the lines I'm filtering in my company information. That last report was nice, but I really didn't see a trend. It was really just maybe year-to-date and monthly. I could have added many more columns to the right of this last report. But then always I have a little happy medium how many columns I want to cram in, because if I wanted to throw in 12 months of data across the 3 columns, that might be 36 or 48 columns, including the total to include if I did show a rolling 12-month. Hence, that's why I'm now showing this third flexible nature of your multi-company report. That is filtering our companies into lines. As this report renders, this top section in a blue heading is company consolidated. Otherwise, here is company 1, maybe some summary data I could drill into, or company 2, etc. And briefly looking at the line set, here is, yes, our natural account, where we're using our summary accounts as defined in that roll-up tree for easy aggregation. Like here's all my revenues, or all the expenses we spoke of earlier. And then definitely to the right, we turned on maybe company A, B, C, D. Now when I do show and display multiple columns, or shall I say segments just then, I could have done the same type of expanding note. Maybe I'm just going to play around ad hoc on the fly here. I'm going to expand above on this total revenue. On the expanded segments, maybe I just expand natural. I could have expanded company, but I've already just expanded company then through the lines there. So you have some options here of doing so. And I'll just stop there, but we have some extra cool little formatting, like maybe the main line, meaning total revenue, maybe I want it bolded and underlined, but maybe all the expanded individual revenues, maybe not underlined or not bolded. I'm not obviously doing that extra font controls, but very easy to show the summary row like total revenue and all the details separately. As I save that line set, I'm just back to the original report, and I just did a keyboard shortcut of the F5 button. Or here in the top left, I could have just refreshed that report based on that line set change. Now, instead of showing one line for revenue, like the company one does above, I'm now showing one level down or all accounts based on, again, your preference. As I maybe show hidden columns here, account 4100 for sales, here's my returns and discounts. And I could have said show hidden lines. Maybe that was suppressed, this revenue row. And I just come up here and show hidden lines to maybe expand it, just like I have maybe 2 or 3 ways to do some expanding or collapsing of information and drill down. All right, good. That sort of wraps up some of the overall company reporting. Let me take just a second to further acquaint you, because I've seen multi-company and a few different flavors. Primarily, I see it as different databases you have in the system. So as we look briefly under segments, in our general ledger, we only have natural, location, and department that most people have. Now, what we do when we read from your multi-company databases is we add a new virtual segment here called company. And under the segment definition, that just sort of gives you a high level, like, again, in our general ledger, natural, location, and department, we have in all of our companies, but in Prospero, we create this additional company dimension. That just gives you a lot of flexibility from what you saw in some of the filtering and reporting and security within the application. Now, another general note I want to make is in the old Manager Porter and FRX era, you never had the ability to wildcard the company. One example might be in a tree. If you had 10 companies and then 5 departments that are shared in those 10 companies, you would have to have at least a 50-unit tree in the old FRX and Manager Porter way, because again, you could not wildcard the company. So that's a nice enhancement and improvement where you can now wildcard and grab the company. I can just run it just for sales department across company if, again, had that security access. Now, additionally, if I wanted to add a new company on the fly, let's say for maybe some new subsidiary we acquired, I don't want to re-implement their whole ERP. Maybe I'm just going to do a simple Excel import, like Derek described his team's done numerous times. Or literally within a couple-hour time, we could write an integration to grab that general ledger data from whatever database automatically. And then here I can just add a new company for such purposes of maybe historical reporting, or this could also be on the fly on the budgeting side if I wanted to add a new company, division, or department that I don't have to go through all the rigmarole inside my general ledger. All right, I close that and I will not save that. Some other bullet points that I led in with that I'll now circle back to. Let's take a brief look at trees, just to show you the ease of where they get created and maintained. I'll further note about report collections, security, and maybe a splash screen on the budgeting side, as maybe I'm going to go full circle with that actual versus budget report. Let me turn our attention now to trees. We saw earlier on the account segment, like our revenue tree or our revenue node within. Let's then turn our attention to trees on the natural segment, because that's something usually new that you did not have in your past reporting life that is super efficient and nice, which means, again, I have only one central tree, like this net income, and then this controls a lot of the behavior on hundreds of different reports that might share and use different lines and calculations. So here is that same type of any structure and names you can create to these. But there's a few of ours we saw for expenses or revenue that I called out. And then through just a right mouse click, you could either insert individual accounts, or you can add ranges or a combination thereof. But then this centralized tree could be used again in multiple different reports. Now, 2 further examples to that. This expense summary account, I want to see where it's used. So I simply can right mouse click on top of any of these summary accounts for where used. And then it tells me, hey, here is in the line set, it's used in these various line sets. So if I change my mind to expenses, it automatically flows down to all these other reports, which, yes, I want my system to do. But other products that I work with that are disparate Excel files or cells or individual items, I do not have this inventory. I have to go back in a lot of times, reopen a bunch of individual files and definitions. So I'm a huge fan of reusable lines, columns, and trees here. Now, how about let's talk about briefly the reverse. On this line set area I'm now circling to, we have this one income statement that I know ahead of time we're using for several reports. We saw earlier looking at the catalog view, but I'm now right-clicking on top of a line set or a column, and I want to see where it's used. It might be used for a report, or it could also be used for budget input. So you can, again, quickly inventory these items and who last modified an item and when. Under Tools, Activity Log, some customers are more audited, might be public, where here is an audit log of who made changes to what inside the system. That gives you nice controls and visibility to such. Another miscellaneous item or two, under Home, Feedback. I think in this 2019 year alone, I think we've had 20, 30 new features, most coming from our existing and even prospective customers that, hey, Derek, we love what we see, but can you possibly add this? So here is you can submit a suggestion. I call this a red hot ticket line into our support and product development team for any new product suggestions, or it could be maybe an issue or support request. And then we have an entire team of support staff that will monitor that throughout the day to get back to you ASAP. So love now having development and support back underneath our belt as opposed to the long Microsoft red tape and trail that no longer. So we're more nimbly responding to those. Let's turn our attention to another bullet point, was the security consideration. By accountants for accountants. So under security, user definition, we saw briefly, I was logged in as a generic user called Manager1, which is what we call a standard user. But secondly, we also have Windows network users we can use that normally we do, but in this demonstration database, I'm logging in as Manager1. And along with all their permissions they can or cannot do, which one correlation, especially what I'll call the Manager Porter hell, Manager Porter security was very decentralized. There were a lot of individual trees you had to secure within Manager Porter, and you only had 4 rigid roles in Manager Porter that you had to work within. This one PowerPoint slide, I'm just going to call out maybe a couple of those bullet points on these slides here of current challenges you have in your reporting and budgeting life, and now Prospero solutions and fixes to those, because now in Prospero, instead of 4 rigid roles in Manager Porter you had to work within, you can have almost infinite number of roles or groups. Secondly, Manager Porter is very decentralized, meaning you had to go in all your different report library folders, secure who or cannot see a report you output within there. Or secondly, you then in Manager Porter had to go to all your different trees and individual tree units to secure. And when you generate a report in Manager Porter, it stored every single version of that report. Versus in Prospero, it only stores the one report version you publish now that you know your month end is done and you want to distribute this to your people, and I'll demonstrate that here in just a second. And it's also central instead of all those individual folders and tree units. As I return back to Prospero, here is any role they can name, like budget input, or I can right mouse click, add a new user or role literally within seconds. And we have various toggle switches of what they can or cannot do inside the system. We'll save some future security details to a purpose-built session on security, but there's one little glimpse. And at least for today, in summary, I want to talk about 2 key concepts for a user. One is their assignments, and secondly is their visibility to reports or maybe budget versions. The first of those 2, the assignments, I'm on Manager 1, clicking on the assignments. I can click on the insert button to add additional lines or rows as need be, or I can just come up here and delete those as we see fit. I'll focus just on this top line, and really these are the different segments they have control and visibility for. Now, any of you that are coming from Microsoft Forecaster, security sort of was subpar and lacking in Microsoft Forecaster. You only could secure one segment. which a lot of times bound you to doing some extra steps. But now Prospero, we have security across multiple segments, even down to the line and calculation of what we call overrides and templates that we have. But here's an example of our company. Yep, you can just say either an asterisk means they have access to all company, or it could be individual companies you choose here, or even from, let's look at the location segment. We looked briefly at one of our reporting trees, like I reside in California. I might be the Western region. Instead of individual departments that begin with the 3 prefix, we probably should have done a wildcard like we see Midwest. But how about Derek is the West? Now, if I change my mind in security, it's real time and flows throughout the entire application. Versus in Manager Porter, if you change a person's security, you'd have to go back and rerun all reports over time, especially historical reports, which stunk. Not applicable inside Prospero now. So that briefly is the user assignment. And finally, key concept is report definition. Let me talk about 2 reports. A balance sheet that maybe only me, a power user, and board of directors gets to see, or how about an income statement I'm going to let all my users see based on their security assignment. So I'm at this one report. We'll call it an income statement for now, but maybe also let's role play maybe a balance sheet, a second report that I'm doing. I can also globally at the role or user level say they can see all reports, but this is a little bit more granular if you need to. But very easily, this report visibility, maybe I want to allow all users to see it, like this income statement. Or those people that are allowed to run the report, yes or no. I might have regional controllers. Yeah, I trust and want them to run it. Let's say the person in Europe, as they do their journal entries early in the morning, I'm not even awake yet. Yeah, I want them maybe to run the reports of the latest, greatest entries they made, but maybe not. I'm a control freak that maybe it's just all my managers outside of accounting that when I'm done with month end, they're just simply going to view reports that I publish. But then if not all users had the visibility to it, I can click on the insert button, and in this field, even though it says user, I could do individual users, yes, but more efficiently, I might do roles. Like here might be my board of director role or my power user role, that maybe they can see this balance sheet report that maybe another role or group cannot. And then finally, the same type of visibility also applies to the budgeting side. Maybe a quick little splash screen to that. Especially on this income statement actual versus budget, maybe I'll pull up, maybe as we start to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes of this session. I sort of wanted to go full circle with this report because it is comparing budget versus actual. I don't want to use Excel hell for my budgeting because most existing Prospero customers that I see in this call and past sessions, they have both the budgeting and reporting ability. So here might be my budget updated this week based on a new quarterly update that I have. And then as I go to the input screen, here might be budget version 1 best case, budget version 2 worst case. That on the visibility remark, yeah, we have the same type of window here. Who can or cannot edit this budget and based on their assignments. But as I come up here and open the input, I'll just default it to whatever last was at, some administrative department. Now we have a session later in this week dealing with the Prospero budgeting, but maybe 1 little minute splash screen of it. Few higher level remarks. One is I could use the same line set for my report as my budget input. Any color coding you want, like here in yellow is what company or department I'm in. Gray shade, perhaps I prefer, indicating items you stay away from versus white you key into. There's line item detail because if I'm in marketing department, or if I wanted to break down travel further, I can come up here and easily insert some additional line items to further break out any big ticket items, like this advertising line. This icon indicator is in an account with a memo or a note. I can hover on top of it to see it. If I put my cursor anywhere on this line, it gives me a nice little time date stamp of who added the note and when. And it could be multiple people because maybe the manager added a note, but maybe my boss said, yep, I reviewed this budget and I approved Derek as projecting this or that. And finally, related to these memos or notes, I also can show an annotation column here to the right. As I thumbtack and pin that annotation maybe on a single line or account, We have some prior actual budget, and we have infinite flexibility of what we have in the lines, columns, or prompt. Right now we have accounts and lines, time, meaning months, years, and column, including budget, the first 12 months, but I could do multi-year budgeting and showing actual prior years. There's my memoir notes. And last little bullet point or two, like salaries, revenues, I can break out using some additional detail tabs. So here's one example of HR by name, position, bonuses, overtimes, pay raises. I can break it out by month if there's any seasonal nature, capital, new fixed asset purchases, etc. I can also see audit trail history, who changed the account and when, just to name a few nice little bells and whistles in the system, as this is now the audit trail of who made the change and when, from like $0 to 1,000. All right, so now that sort of goes full circle with one of the reports I led in with, the actual versus budget. Look at some other security considerations of assignments, their visibility. And let me wrap up here in the next few minutes. If you have any follow-up questions, what I'd like to do is pull up my contact information. Let me explain this slide as we do so. So again, my email is derek.krebs@msxgroup.com, and I take it to heart for those existing prospective customers. Feel free to email me. I'm glad to share some tips and efficiencies to bring the easy button to the budget reporting life there. For those prospective customers on the call, glad to do a one-on-one product overview to address any of your current process needs and goals as you maybe look to consider a new future product. So hopefully Prospero is on that list. I'll be glad to do that. And most of our existing customers, I see several on the call today that can attest to that. We even have a free trial version, even using your data, where we can convert your reports. So we can show you some of the efficiencies and even maybe better ways to expand and using some of those subtotal or graphical natures or budgeting abilities. So I want to thank you one and all for attending today's session, and we'll look for you at a future MSX event. So everybody have a good day, and goodbye.